There is a certain kind of man the world does not quite know what to do with, not because he is impossible to understand, but because he is too inconvenient. Miyamoto Musashi never served a single lord. He never married. He never founded a formal school during his lifetime. He rarely used a real steel sword in his most famous duels. And he never lost. 61 years, more than 60 recorded duels, 0 defeats. This is not merely a legend. It is a historical problem that scholars are still trying to explain. To understand Musashi, you first have to understand the Japan that produced him. He was born into a country emerging from more than a century of civil war. A fractured world in which entire clans disappeared, cities burned, and generations of men grew up knowing little besides how to kill or how to avoid being killed. The reunification of Japan came through 3 successive figures: Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and finally, Tokugawa Ieyasu, who secured victory at Sekigahara in October of 1600. That battle, described by Mason and Kager as the decisive encounter of the age, brought together roughly 160,000 men and marked the beginning of the Tokugawa order that would dominate Japan for more than 2 centuries. That matters because Musashi was born in the middle of a transition that changed the meaning of the samurai itself. The warrior class that had once defined power on the battlefield was slowly being transformed into something else, an administrative class, disciplined, literate, and increasingly detached from actual combat. By around 1650, as the documents note, that transformation was virtually complete. The new samurai mastered etiquette and bureaucracy. Musashi belonged to an older world. He was perhaps one of the last great products of a system of war that was already dying while he was still alive. He was probably born in 1584 somewhere in Harima or Mimasaka, though historians still dispute the exact location. His birth name was Shinmen Takezo. Even the uncertainty of his birthplace tells you something important. Musashi arrived in history not as a polished figure, but through fragments, monuments, and later compilations. His father, Shinmen Munisai, was a respected master of arms, honored with the title, the greatest warrior under the sun. But the sources also suggest that he was likely a difficult, possibly violent father. Musashi left home at the age of 8 and never returned. That detail is small on the page, but enormous in implication. Whatever shaped him early did not produce attachment. It produced distance. At 13, Musashi encountered a public challenge posted by a swordsman named Arima Kihei. This was the kind of challenge a professional warrior used to establish his reputation in a new region. Musashi answered it. Later sources differ in their precise details, but on the outcome they agree completely. Arima Kihei died. The boy used a piece of wood. Then he walked away. What is remarkable is not only the violence of the act, but the emotional silence that surrounds it. We do not know what Musashi felt afterward. He never told us. Decades later, he reduced the episode to a single line. My first duel was at age 13. No reflection, no remorse, no triumph. Just the fact, presented like a field report. The road Musashi traveled for years was not the romantic Japan of later cinema. It was a country trying to impose peace on men trained for war. The Ronin, samurai without a lord, became a socially unstable class, armed, skilled, proud, and increasingly unnecessary. The Tokugawa state regulated military houses, restricted castles, alliances, and troop movement, and in doing so made peace into a matter of law. But peace by decree does not instantly erase a warrior's instincts. Musashi was one of those men without a natural place in the new order. The difference is that he did not spend his life searching for a master to restore his status. He searched for opponents. For more than 15 years, he moved through Japan on foot. He slept where he could. He ate what was available. Musashi repeatedly refused permanent offers from respected daimyo. That decision reveals the core of his life. He did not want comfort. He did not want belonging. He wanted trial, exposure, confrontation. The road was not simply where he traveled. The road was the method by which he tested himself against the world. Most people know Musashi as the man of two swords. Fewer understand what made his method so psychologically devastating. In many documented duels, Musashi used wood, not steel. That was not a limitation. It was a statement. A wooden sword in his hands was enough to kill, and in several cases it did. More than that, it sent a message before the fight had even begun. Steel was unnecessary because the duel in his mind was already over. He was not simply winning through technique. He was winning by breaking the enemy's certainty. One of the clearest examples is his encounter with Miyake Gunbei, a skilled swordsman associated with the Honda clan. According to the account summarized in the script materials, Musashi entered without warning through a narrow corridor carrying two wooden swords. No formal introduction, no ceremonial pose. He simply appeared, said, "Now," and Gunbei, a veteran of real battle, began to collapse psychologically before a blow had been struck. Musashi then controlled the rhythm of the room, drawing him in, retreating, provoking, until Gunbei lunged and was struck across the face. Gunbei survived, but later said he had known only 2 moments of genuine terror in his life. One on the battlefield at Osaka, and the other when Musashi entered that room. That is perhaps the most revealing detail of all. Musashi's greatest weapon was not his hand. It was presence. Then comes the duel that made him immortal. Ganryujima, April 13, 1612. A small island in the Kanman Strait near Kokura. On one side stood Sasaki Kojiro, everything Musashi was not. Kojiro had prestigious affiliations, recognized training, and a famous longsword known as the Drying Pole. Musashi arrived hours late. That much is documented. Why he arrived late is debated. Why he arrived late remains debated. Some see carelessness, others see calculation. Forcing Kojiro to stand in the heat under the sun, trapped inside his own impatience while Musashi preserved his strength. Whether that delay was accidental or deliberate, the duel entered history because it revealed Musashi at the height of his psychological control and physical efficiency. During the boat ride to the island, Musashi carved a bakken from one of the oars. When he stepped ashore, Kojiro drew his blade and threw away the scabbard. The exact words exchanged are uncertain, but the meaning preserved in tradition is clear. A man who throws away his scabbard has already lost. What followed lasted only seconds. Kojiro launched his signature attack, a strike said to move like a swallow in flight. Musashi moved first. His wooden sword crashed into Kojiro's temple. Kojiro's blade sliced the cloth band across Musashi's head and barely touched the skin. Nothing more. Kojiro fell. Musashi turned and walked back toward the boat without looking behind him. He was 29 years old, and after Ganryujima, his name passed from the world of fighters into the territory of legend. And yet to stop at Ganryujima is to misunderstand him. The legend of Musashi the killer often erases Musashi the artist. But he was one, very concretely. His ink paintings survive in Japanese museums. Some have been designated national treasures. He designed gardens. He worked with metal. He engaged with No. His calligraphy is still studied. This is not a decorative footnote to his life. It is part of the same mind. The man who calculated the timing of a fatal strike also calculated line, balance, emptiness, and form. At the opening of the Book of Five Rings, Musashi wrote, "Touch upon all of the arts. develop a discerning eye in all matters. That is not the language of a brute. It is the language of someone trying to understand pattern wherever it appears. The sources also preserve glimpses of a harder, quieter side of his private character. He adopted 2 sons, Mikinosuke and Yori, both of whom had demonstrated loyalty and filial responsibility in his presence. One of them, Mikinosuke, later committed junshi, ritual suicide, in honor of his dead lord at the age of 23. The account in the material states that Musashi knew in advance that it would happen. He prepared a farewell meal. He did not stop him. He did not condemn him. He simply said goodbye. Whether one reads that as emotional austerity, discipline, or something colder is up to the viewer. But it belongs in the picture. It complicates the usual heroic image, and the documents insist on that complexity. In his later years, Musashi withdrew to Reigan Cave near Kumamoto. He had accepted the hospitality of the Hosokawa clan, but not as a conventional samurai bound to service. That distinction mattered to him. Even at the end of his life, he stayed close to power without ever fully belonging to it. In that cave, he completed the Goren no Sho, the Book of 5 Rings. Today, it is often reduced to a manual of combat or strategy, but it is far more than that. It is a portrait of the ideal warrior's way of life, a disciplined mind shaped by conflict, sharpened by solitude, and stripped of illusion. Musashi was not simply explaining how to defeat an opponent. He was trying to define what a human being becomes after a lifetime of confrontation, discipline, and absolute clarity. 1 week before his death in May of 1645, he wrote Dokudo, The Path of Walking Alone. It consists of 21 short precepts offered without elaboration. Do not have preferences. Do not seek pleasure for its own sake. Do not cling to any place. Accept that separation from life is inevitable. These are not ornamental sayings. They are the compressed remains of a life lived in radical detachment. He handed the text to his disciple, Terao Magonoho, and then he died. There is something severe in that ending. No grand finale, no redemption scene. Just a final set of principles, stripped almost to bone. So what, finally, was Miyamoto Musashi? A swordsman, obviously, a ronin, a duelist, a strategist, an artist. A man who may have understood human confrontation more deeply than almost anyone of his age. But he was also a figure that resists comfortable categories. Even the production notes behind this episode insist on separating facts from hypotheses and on naming historical gaps rather than filling them with fantasy. That caution matters, because Musashi is precisely the kind of person later generations are tempted to romanticize. The real man is more difficult than the myth. He is also more interesting. Musashi did not seem to want sainthood, and he did not write like a man trying to become a legend. What he appears to have wanted was understanding, to know what remains when skill, fear, habit, solitude, beauty, and death are forced into the same life. He spent 61 years asking that question through action. We do not know whether he found an answer. The documents are honest about that. But he left the question behind in a form that has not faded, and that may be the real reason he still feels alive.